How a single company is defending an entire country from the Chinese invasion. How they have created an invisible defense system called the Silicon Shield. How they continue to exist 110 miles away from the third world's strongest military in the world, which does not recognize their independence. This is the story of TSMC, their founder Morris Chang, and how a single company ranked number 9 by market capitalization is safeguarding Taiwan and whether this protection is fading. Welcome to Howdiology, and this is a video about TSMC, Taiwan's guardian angel. To tell the story of TSMC, we need to tell the story of its founder, Morris Chang. Born in East China, since early childhood he experienced many relocations and wars. From the city of Ningbo, he moved to the British-controlled Hong Kong. He lived peacefully until the Japanese attacked. Many remember the day Pearl Harbor was attacked and marked it as Japan's declaration of war on the United States. But Morris Chang mostly remembers the day after it, when the Japanese invaded Hong Kong. He was forced to live under the Japanese occupation until he and his family fled to the temporary capital Chongqing and waited for the surrender of Japan. Now that World War II was over, they moved to Shanghai to salvage their lives and turn over a new leaf, but quickly realized they had to escape to Hong Kong because the newly formed Chinese Communist Party, with the help of the Soviet Union, was overthrowing the nationalist government. This was directly endangering Morris Chang, since everyone opposed to the communist regime was going to die, including his own family. The nationalist government and its supporters moved to the island of Formosa, Portuguese given name for a beautiful island, which has a second, drastically more popular name, and as most of you should have guessed, it is called Taiwan. The relocation of the Republic of China to Taiwan was not a safe or quick process, so the family decided to send Morris Chang to the land far, far away, where China could never even dream of entering, the most dominant power in the world, the United States of America. As a freshman, he studied at Harvard, but transferred and completed bachelor's and master's at MIT in mechanical engineering. After finishing his master's in mechanical engineering from MIT, Morris Chang tried twice to pass the MIT's doctorate qualification exam, but failed both times. This meant that his only choice from that point on was to start working in the field. He had 4 job offers, out of which he chose to work at Sylvania Semiconductor. He was mainly focused on device physics and temperature manipulation, which proved very useful when he left the company after 3 years and decided to join a more rapidly growing and emerging giant in the field, Texas Instruments. He packed his bags, moved to Texas, and began a completely new journey which would last 25 years. To sum up his current career, Morris Chang had a bachelor's and a master's from MIT and had 3 years of hands-on experience in the semiconductor field. When he went to Texas Instruments, he started out as an engineering supervisor and had 2 to 3 people reporting directly to him. Back in those days, the defect rates of chip manufacturing were extremely high, and when I say extremely high, I mean that out of 100 chips that were produced during the first 3 years, all 100 of them had the same underlying problem. The wafers from which those chips were cut were made from multiple silicon transistors. In a single chip, less than 10% of the transistors were functional and the rest were defective. Therefore, when Morris Chang kept using everything he learned at Sylvania and by self-studying device physics and temperature manipulation, after 3 years he came up with the recipe which increased the yield by 20 to 30%. And it meant that now they could produce 4 times more operational transistors, which then would be distributed among the chips. This was groundbreaking for Texas Instruments, since now it meant that they now had a product that they could sell to the consumer and finally start making money. This meant a big promotion for Morris Chang to a new sizable engineering section, and he also got an offer from his boss for him to finish PhD, and TI would pay his salary, tuition and cost of living while he was studying. Morris Chang gladly accepted this offer and chose Stanford University, where he easily passed the qualification exam, and after 2.5 years, he returned to TI as Morris Chang, a doctor in electrical engineering. As he returned from Stanford to TI, his career shifted from the self-developing hands-on worker to now a manager of more than 2,000 people. He fit the new role of manager perfectly, and he was moved from less important departments to the more important ones until he became the group vice president of TI's semiconductor business. His career at that point reached its all-time high, and after this it went only down and down. After his great run, TI decided that they fully exhausted Morris Chang and they put him up for pasture. TI started focusing more on electronics than semiconductors themselves, and after Morris Chang was passed over for the position of president of TI, his mind was fully made up. His 25-year-long career with Texas Instruments had ended, making him free to start new adventures. The first offer after his leave from TI was from a New York-based General Instruments. Morris Chang accepted the position of a COO, but when he got there, he quickly realized that the company was not actually a semiconductor company, but a merger acquisition firm. There were many key differences between these two companies which can be showcased by comparing 2 types of buildings. First one, which will be representing Texas Instruments, is a very tall building with a very strong foundation. The company knows how good their foundation is and therefore has every reason to depend on it and build on top of it. They have their own workforce and in-house trained talent dedicated to perfecting this foundation so that their tall building will never collapse. They build on top of what they are great at and therefore diversify organically. General Instruments is a different kind of building. Just like TI, it has a great foundation, but instead of increasing the height of the building, they try to build more buildings around it. Instead of building on top of what they are good at, they try to diversify and build an entire neighborhood which is built by part-time workers and freelancers. Instead of developing, perfecting their own technology and capitalizing on what they are great at, they choose to diversify. This type of growth for a company is very inorganic since it diversifies so much that along the way it forgets where its strength came from. And in the end, you end up with a construction company trying to sell you a car. This business plan worked for GI, but Morris Chang did not want to be a part of it. And therefore, after his first year, he left the company. This is where the real journey for Morris Chang starts, so buckle up and let's delve into the creation of the 9th biggest company in the world, TSMC. After his leave from GI, Morris Chang had very limited options. Of course, he was still Morris Chang, the pioneer in the semiconductor industry, but his recent track record did not really showcase that. He left Texas Instruments while never becoming a CEO, and left General Instrument after a single year. His dream to become a CEO of a huge US-based company came to an end, and he became very open-minded to new types of propositions. At this time, 3 most important people in Taiwan approached Morris Chang and tried recruiting him. First was Kuo-Tin Lee, who I will refer to as KT Lee, former Minister of Finance and the visionary who wanted him and no one else for the job. Second was the former highest-ranking official, Sun Yun-san, who laid the foundation for Taiwan to be reformed into a tech giant. And third was the current highest-ranking official, the Premier of Taiwan, Yu Kuo-hua. Morris Chang now had 2 options. Either leave the country and try to start a completely new company based in Taiwan, or stay in the United States and give up on ever becoming a CEO of a huge company. Of course, he took the red pill, and with the help of these people, Morris Chang became the head of Industrial Technology Research Institute, ITRI. Few weeks after Morris Chang arrived in Taiwan, he had a meeting with KT Lee, and was given a 4-day deadline for him to come up with a business plan for a Taiwan-based semiconductor company. Morris Chang started thinking. He assessed Taiwan's strengths, which were practically none. So instead of depending on Taiwan's non-existent strength, he decided to eliminate most of Taiwan's weaknesses in one simple decision. At that time, the market share was dominated by the Japanese and American companies. Japan had great manufacturing and second-best design technology. Their short-sightedness was that they mostly used their manufacturing only for themselves and were keeping their high yields inclusive. The US had the best designs, but small manufacturing capabilities, which suggested the need for manufacturing facilities. This, along with the fact that the hardest part in chip manufacturing was actually the design and marketing of it, and by making TSMC a manufacturing-only company, they eliminated their 2 biggest weaknesses while providing a service which was very desired. Along with all of these thoughts, Morris Chang had read the book of Caltech professor Carver Mead, who in his paper suggested the separation of the manufacturing and design of the chips, but did not actually see the market for it. But Morris Chang did. He combined everything he had learned in his 30-year career in this field and came up with the conclusion that a foundry model, aka the manufacturing facility, is what the industry needed the most. To get a better understanding of his thinking, we'll explain the industry back in those days. The 2 biggest players in chip design at that time were undoubtedly Texas Instruments and Intel. They both had their own manufacturing facilities, but when the demand was higher and their capacity was not enough, they had only one choice: to send their designs to their competitor for them to manufacture the chips for them. This, in the end, would result in a gruesome intellectual property fight, because of course their competitor would try to steal the design, and the funniest part is that they had no other choice. They had to willingly send their own chip designs to their competitors to manufacture it for them and expect that the confidentiality of the design would not be broken. On the other side of people who would become great customers for a foundry model company were the individuals who had unique designs in their minds but had no capital to manufacture them. The only way for them to start their own business would be to order manufacturing from their direct competitors, who were these giant companies that would take their ideas and would even win the court case. The industry needed someone who would increase their capacity of manufacturing without stealing the designs, and the only big company that would do that would be TSMC, since they did not try to compete with these companies in chip design. TSMC instead helped them and increased their ability to manufacture. All of this sounds great on paper, but reality was cruel. In 1985, this plan was suggested by Morris Chang, and the Taiwanese government told him that they could only invest half of the money and the rest had to be raised by Morris Chang himself. Morris Chang acquired many small investors, but a single large investor, to his surprise, did not come from the company based in the USA, where Morris dominated the industry, but instead it came from a European giant, Philips. With Philips's 27.5% stake in the company, Taiwan's 50%, and the rest of the small investors, the money raising ended in 1986 with over $48 million raised, and in 1987 TSMC was established. At first, their biggest customers were the big companies, who needed manufacturing when they were expecting a high demand. But their business was very unreliable. They could cancel the orders as soon as they saw that demand was decreasing, or when they acquired the necessary means to manufacture the chips themselves. This is why TSMC depended so much on the small companies, who no longer had any fear of starting their own businesses just because they could not build an entire manufacturing facility. This sparked the formation of hundreds of small companies, who now had to only design the chip, and they could order the manufacturing in Taiwan. Over the years, TSMC gained more and more trust and increased in size. In 1994, they went public on the Taiwan Stock Exchange and gained a market evaluation of $3.73 billion. During COVID and the global chip shortage, their market cap doubled from $254 billion to over $500 billion in 2021. Before 2013, their majority customer base were still small to mid-sized companies on which they built their trust, and after 2013, they started manufacturing for the biggest names like Apple, Nvidia, and AMD. At the time of the recording, they are ranked number 10 with $814 billion evaluation. And the quick fun fact, the 27.5% that Philips initially owned would now be worth around $220 billion, but Philips, over the years, sold their stake in the company for roughly around $8.5 billion, $211.5 billion less if they kept the stock. As for Morris Chang, after his founding of TSMC at the age of 56, he left the company in 2018 after 31 years of his leadership. He finally realized his dream of becoming a CEO, and more than that, a founder of such a huge company. Lastly, I would like to thank everyone who watched this video. I know that the audio is not high quality, and I know that editing is not as smooth as I would like it to be. But we will only improve from this point on. If you like this video, there could be a part 2 about what exactly integrated circuits/chips are, why is the world so dependent on them, and how is 10th biggest company in the world protecting Taiwan, and whether this protection is either fading or strengthening. This was Audiology, and thanks to all of you for watching.